His name doesn't show up in your high school history book. But the enemy kept running into him anyway, over 100 times, and every time, he walked away, or limped, sometimes crawled, but always lived. The kid who refused boredom. Back when cavalry charges still made headlines, Jack Churchill was born in 1906, who'd grow up to treat war like a full-contact hobby. He was raised in British Ceylon, learned to ride horses before he could shave, and played bagpipes like it was a competitive blood sport. He looked like a school teacher but acted like a man with zero fear and no volume control. He joined the British Army in 1926, mostly because he liked uniforms and chaos. After a quiet start, he quit, got bored, and worked as a newspaper editor, actor, and archery instructor. Yes, with real arrows, the man could split a pencil from 200 yards. It was fun until Germany got rowdy. When World War II kicked off, Jack marched straight back into uniform. The army said, "Bring a gun." Jack said, "How about a longbow?" And not as a joke, he actually carried it into combat, along with a Scottish broadsword and a set of bagpipes. Not standard issue, but no one stopped him, probably because they were scared. His first confirmed kill of the war? A Nazi officer, taken out with a longbow. That's believed to be the last longbow kill in military history. Of course it was Jack. Guns existed, he just didn't care. He liked to charge into battle while playing bagpipes. Imagine storming a beach, bullets flying, and hearing "Will ye no come back again" echoing through the smoke. That was Jack's entrance music. Subtlety was not in his vocabulary. He joined the Commandos, basically Britain's Do the Impossible squad. His specialty? Leading night raids with a claymore in one hand and a grin on his face. He'd signal attacks by blasting his pipes. Stealth? Nope. Style? Absolutely. This was only the start. He hadn't even hit double digits in battles yet. But by now, everyone knew one thing. Jack Churchill didn't follow rules. He rewrote them, loudly, in the middle of enemy fire, probably while humming a Scottish march. And somehow, he kept surviving. Bagpipes intact, sword sharp, nerves of steel, and maybe just a little bit off. Sword first, questions never. By 1941, Jack wasn't just in the war, he was giving it whiplash. Most soldiers cleared rooms with grenades. Jack did it with a broadsword. He didn't sneak, he stormed. His first major test? The Norway campaign. Cold, chaotic, and full of Germans who really didn't know what to make of a howling man in full battle gear playing bagpipes on the front lines. Jack led the attack on the town of Vågsøy. This was a coastal raid packed with gunfire, snow, and very confused Nazis. Before the shooting even started, Jack stood on the deck of his landing craft, sword raised, pipes blaring, just daring someone to question his life choices. When they hit the beach, most men ducked. Jack ran ahead, waving his broadsword like he was reenacting Braveheart, except this was real, and the bullets weren't blanks. He was the first one into town. He cleared houses one by one, yelling and swinging steel. His men followed because, honestly, who wouldn't follow that kind of madness? That day, the British took out German troops, destroyed infrastructure, and blew up fish oil factories that helped power enemy vehicles. It was a success, loud, brutal, and straight out of a war comic. Jack didn't just survive, he walked away grinning. Again, a few weeks later, Yugoslavia. More chaos, more explosions. Churchill led the commandos behind enemy lines, hitting German positions hard and fast. He'd disappear into the dark, sword in hand, and reappear with prisoners or fresh wounds, or both. Still no helmet, still no rifle, just vibes and steel. He captured 42 German soldiers with nothing but a sword and a revolver. How? He just yelled at them until they listened. They were surrounded, sure, but let's be real. When a man with a claymore tells you to drop your weapon, you drop your weapon. By now, Jack Churchill had made it clear. He wasn't just surviving battles, he was enjoying them. And he was only getting warmed up. Welcome to Italy, please surrender. By 1943, he had fought in snow, fought in storms, and now, he got a Mediterranean upgrade. Italy. The Allies had just landed at Salerno. It was a mess, German artillery everywhere, beach, chaos, and no clear front line. Naturally, Jack grabbed his sword and marched straight into it. His mission? Help push through German defenses and link up with American forces inland. His method? The usual, piping tunes across open terrain like bullets, were just background noise. He wasn't sneaky. He was a one-man parade. One night, he led his men behind enemy lines, through thick brush and moonlight. Somewhere near Molina, they ambushed a German outpost. Jack gave the signal. Bagpipes, of course. That night alone, his team captured over a dozen German troops and caused a full retreat. He marched the prisoners out personally, sword still strapped to his side like it was totally normal behavior. But the real jaw-dropper came the next day. While scouting ahead, Jack and one corporal spotted a column of German soldiers, 42 of them, armed. Jack didn't flinch. He pulled out his sword, shouted commands like he was running a boot camp, and convinced them they were surrounded. Spoiler, they weren't. They dropped their weapons and surrendered to 2 guys. One of them with a giant sword. The other probably wondering what the hell was happening. By this point, Churchill had become a legend, not because of rank or medals, because he was doing the impossible, repeatedly, with nothing but confidence, steel, and a borderline unhinged sense of fun. Oh, and one other thing. He still hadn't been seriously injured. Not a scratch. War seemed to bounce off him. So far, the score was Jack. 3 wars, 0 near-death experiences. That was about to change. One where he finally got caught. In 1944, Jack Churchill parachuted into Yugoslavia with one mission: sabotage German operations from the inside. As the Nazis tightened their grip on the Balkans, Churchill teamed up with local partisans and a small British unit to blow up bridges, ambush convoys, and disrupt German retreat routes. He was good at it. Too good. For weeks, his unit hit railways, ambushed convoys, and vanished into the hills before the enemy could react. Jack led night raids in pitch black, sword on one side, bagpipes on the other, because clearly, silence was for cowards. He'd pipe a few tunes before an ambush. Why? To keep the lads in step, he said. It also had the fun side effect of scaring the hell out of German patrols who couldn't figure out if they were being attacked or haunted. But eventually, even Jack's luck ran out. One night, near the town of Brash, his unit was ambushed. Mortars fell, bullets flew, and chaos exploded across the hillside. Jack held the line as long as he could. He ran out of ammunition. His men were dead or captured. So naturally, he stood up, straightened his uniform, and started playing Will Ye No Come Back Again on his bagpipes, right in the middle of live fire. The Germans didn't shoot him, they just stared. When they finally grabbed him, they probably assumed he was some kind of lunatic bard who wandered too far from home. Instead, they just captured Britain's loudest and least predictable soldier. They shipped him to Sachsenhausen, a Nazi concentration camp for high-value prisoners, spies, generals, resistance leaders. Jack fit right in, if by fit in you mean immediately began planning his escape. He and a fellow officer dug a tunnel with a rusty spoon and floor slats stolen from their barracks. They slipped out one night and made it more than 100 miles toward the Baltic coast before being caught. Again, no panic, just a shrug. They tossed him into a different camp in Austria. That didn't stop him either. When the guards weren't looking, Jack walked out and hiked 150 miles through the Alps, alone, until he ran into US troops. They asked what unit he was with. He said, "Yours now." War's over? Not for Jack. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the world exhaled. Soldiers packed their bags. Headlines declared victory. Jack Churchill? He tightened his boots. He wasn't ready to go home. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't know how. His war wasn't over, not in his head, not in his bones. While others shipped off for civilian life, Jack signed on for more. Any front? Any fight? Wherever the map still had heat, Jack wanted in. He didn't crave violence, he just didn't know how to operate without it. His first post-war deployment was Palestine. The British mandate was unraveling, and the region teetered on open conflict. Tensions between Jewish paramilitary groups and British forces exploded into raids, ambushes, and retaliation. Jack landed straight in the middle of it. In 1947, during a roadside ambush, 2 of his men were hit. Jack charged through open gunfire to pull them out, unarmed, no cover, just instinct. He didn't call it brave, he called it necessary. If someone was down, you moved. That was the rule. There were no speeches, just motion. He wasn't chasing medals, he wasn't chasing anything. He just didn't stop moving. Next came Australia. Jack was nearly 40 when he applied for parachute school. Most men his age were building sheds and worrying about back pain. Jack? He wanted to jump out of planes. He passed the course. Of course he did. Between deployments, he stayed sharp the only way he knew how. Chaos with a purpose. He hiked in full kit through the hills, practiced longbow drills in his yard, led training sessions that looked more like medieval war games. Some recruits thought he was nuts, most just tried to keep up. He wasn't violent for the thrill. He just didn't know how to ease off the gas. Training. War. It was all the same rhythm. Full send, no breaks. Still no memoir, still no press. Just whispers, stares, and the occasional snapped photo by someone trying to prove he was real. Jack Churchill didn't need another war to stay dangerous. He just needed a reason to move. Retirement would have to wait. The sword and the surfboard. By the 1950s, Jack Churchill had survived war zones across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Most men his age were trimming hedges and yelling at neighborhood kids. Jack was still leaping out of planes and challenging the concept of safety wherever he went. He returned to England as an officer trainer, meaning some poor recruits got stuck learning hand-to-hand combat from a guy who once stormed a Nazi bunker with a sword. The training was intense, borderline terrifying, and oddly inspiring. Jack didn't just teach the manual, he threw it out and rewrote it with bagpipe solos and actual arrows. He also pushed for more military archery programs, because why not? Modern war might have moved on to missiles, but Jack wasn't ready to let go of the longbow. He gave demonstrations using straw targets. Occasionally, he'd miss, by an inch, still more accurate than most riflemen. Despite the chaos, there was method to it. Jack cared deeply about discipline. He hated lazy officers, slow thinkers, or anything that looked like bureaucracy. He once shut down a pointless training session by loudly playing the pipes until everyone left. No one reported him. Everyone was too scared. Outside of the barracks, Jack lived like a man still on campaign. He hiked with full gear for fun, kept his sword sharp, and surfed in freezing water off the English coast. No wetsuit, just nerves and a board. His favorite surf spot? The River Severn tidal bore, a natural wave that pushes inland like a mini tsunami. Most locals avoided it. Jack rode it standing up, bagpipes blasting from a dry bag strapped to his chest. By the late 50s, Jack had served in nearly every major conflict the British Army touched for 30 years. Europe, North Africa, Asia. His battle count was over 100 engagements, possibly more, depending on what you counted as combat. If you asked him, every Monday before coffee. And yet, no memoir, no medals on display, just dusty boxes, old uniforms, and stories people swore had to be fake. But they weren't. They just sounded fake because real life wasn't supposed to be this insane. With one foot in history and the other on a surfboard, Jack Churchill marched into retirement. Still upright, still smirking, still waiting for the next fight. One last mission that never came. By 1945, Jack Churchill had survived more than 100 battles. He had stormed beaches with a broadsword, led nighttime ambushes with nothing but a revolver and a grin, and walked out of Nazi captivity by trekking solo through the Alps. And still, he wasn't ready to stop. Most men hoped the war would end. Jack hoped it would stretch just long enough for one final campaign. That campaign was Burma. The Pacific Theater was still raging, and the Allies were closing in on Japan. Churchill volunteered without blinking. He trained for jungle warfare, practiced night maneuvers, studied enemy strongholds, and reviewed the terrain until he could picture it blindfolded. His kit? A claymore, his pipes, and a mind itching for more chaos. He was ready. He wanted to drop into dense jungle with his sword out front and bagpipes screaming through the trees. He'd even memorized lines of attack through the thickest terrain, marking down every possible ambush spot in his notes. But history had other plans. Before he even reached the front, the US dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, then Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war was over, just like that. Churchill's reaction wasn't relief, it was fury. "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks," he muttered to fellow officers, "we could have kept the war going another 10 years. He didn't say it with a smirk. He meant it. He wasn't obsessed with violence. He was obsessed with finishing what he started. He had escaped POW camps, crossed entire mountain ranges, and prepped for a jungle assault down to the last detail, only to be sidelined by peace. It wasn't closure, it was interruption. To Jack, it felt like being yanked off stage just before the final act. The lights went out, but he was still mid-swing. He didn't mourn the war's end like a soldier. He resented it like a performer who never got to hit the crescendo. Most men cheered. Jack laced his boots tighter. He didn't celebrate VJ Day. He sharpened his sword, packed his gear, and waited for someone to call him back. But no one did. For the first time in years, the world around Jack Churchill stood still. And stillness was the one thing he never trained for. He didn't understand what to do with that silence, so he didn't stop moving. The war may have ended, Jack hadn't. The man who outran history. He retired in 1959, but calling it retirement is generous. Jack Churchill stopped getting military orders, but he never stopped living like war might break out any second. He settled in Surrey, technically peaceful, but not if you live next door. Mornings started with bagpipes, often in the yard. Weekdays involved jumping off moving trains to shorten his commute. Sundays? He launched homemade model warships into the Thames, then narrated their battles like a caffeinated history teacher. Neighbors learned to stop asking questions. The noise, the smoke, the occasional flying piece of wood, it was all part of the Jack experience. Some thought he was eccentric. Others thought he was rehearsing. They weren't wrong. He wore a bowler hat but walked like he was still scouting for snipers. Locals said he moved like a man who'd cleared too many buildings and didn't trust peace to last. Jack attended military events occasionally but skipped the speeches. He didn't pose for photos. And he definitely didn't show off his medals. They were stuffed in drawers somewhere, probably under a coil of rope or a spare compass. If someone asked about them, he'd deflect, change the subject to archery technique, tactical mistakes made by generals in 1917, or the hydrodynamics of his new battleship model. He never remarried, never had kids, but he wasn't lonely. Jack collected odd friendships, young officers, gardeners, surfers, schoolchildren who mistook him for a warlock. Everyone had a Jack story. Most involved fire, steel, or surprise music. Once, a police officer asked him to stop playing the pipes in a public park. Jack responded, "Practice makes perfect," and kept playing. They didn't stop him. Even in his later years, Jack carried himself like a man still on deployment. Pocket knife in his coat. Boots polished, pipes always nearby. He once told a neighbor, dead serious, "You never know when something needs a good tune, or a swift push." The quiet life bored him. He didn't want a garden, he wanted targets. He wasn't trying to recapture his past. He just never stopped living the way he always had, at full volume, slightly armed, and completely unapologetic. Jack Churchill didn't wind down. He just shifted gears. The war may have ended. Jack never really did. The commute that terrified London. After 30 years of military chaos, Jack Churchill did something wild. He retired. Sort of. In 1959, he moved back to England and took a quiet desk job with the Ministry of Defense. No sword, no explosions, just paperwork. But Jack being Jack, the drama followed him anyway, specifically to his commute. Each morning, he boarded a train to London. Seemed normal. But when the train neared his home station, Churchill didn't wait for it to stop. He threw his briefcase out the window, timed it to hit the platform, then jumped out himself, while the train was still moving. Why? Because his house was closer to that end of the platform. It shaved off about 90 seconds of walking. That was enough. He did this daily. No permission, no apologies. The rail staff gave up trying to stop him. New passengers freaked out. Regulars just shrugged. That's Jack. At home, he spent his free time building model warships, which he floated down the Thames. But these weren't toys. He painted them with military precision, narrated their battles aloud, and sometimes scolded them if they lost. Neighbors occasionally complained about the bagpipes. Jack played them in the yard, the attic, the kitchen, anywhere. His favorite tunes were wartime marches. Most nights ended with a solo concert and a glass of scotch. He never gave interviews. He never capitalized on his story. No agent, no memoir. If you wanted to hear what he did, you had to meet someone who saw it. Even in retirement, Jack carried himself like a man between battles. The world was too quiet. He filled it with noise. He didn't slow down. He didn't blend in. He just kept charging forward, even if the enemy was now a train schedule. The legend without the memoir. By every metric, Jack Churchill should have been a household name. He was one of the most decorated, eccentric, and flat-out unkillable men in modern warfare. He had enough material for 5 war movies and a theme park. And yet, he never cashed in. No book deals, no ghost-written memoirs, no TV interviews. While his peers were writing dramatic chapters with titles like Through Fire and Steel, Jack was surfing, whittling, or reenacting the Battle of Hastings in his backyard. He didn't write about himself because, honestly, he didn't think any of it was that special. Fighting with a longbow? Logical. Playing bagpipes into combat? Motivational. Jumping from moving trains on his commute? Efficient. He wasn't pretending to be brave, he just wasn't afraid, and he didn't waste time explaining it. Still, his legacy lived on, mostly through disbelief. Soldiers who served under him would swap stories that sounded completely made up. Yeah, he cleared that bunker with a sword. Yeah, he took 40 prisoners with a yell. Yeah, he walked across the Alps alone after escaping the Nazis. Every time, someone would say, "No way." But it was always true. Every mad detail, backed by records, dispatches, and a growing legend among veterans. He died in 1996 at age 89. Not with a bang, but with a sigh, probably disappointed that he went out quietly. He was buried with military honors, but no global headlines, just a small ceremony, a few close friends, and his beloved bagpipes playing in the distance. No farewell speech, no grand send-off. And honestly, that's probably how Jack would have wanted it. Because if you asked him to sum up his life, he'd probably shrug and say, "I was just doing my job." But make no mistake, Jack Churchill was war's strangest miracle, and somehow, history almost forgot him.